The rain came down like judgment that October night in 1879, turning the dirt roads of Eden's Hollow into rivers of mud. Lightning split the Wyoming sky, illuminating for brief moments a solitary figure stumbling through the storm. Eliza May Thornton pressed herself against the weathered boards of the old church, her threadbare shawl offering no protection from the cold rain that had already soaked through to her bones. Her boots split at the seams, squelched with each step as she tried to find shelter beneath the narrow eaves. The church door was locked had been for months since Reverend Morrison passed, but at least the overhang offered some refuge from the worst of the downpour. She'd walked 15 miles from Cheyenne, the last 3 in this deluge. Her stomach had stopped complaining hours ago, resigned to emptiness. In her pocket, she carried her last earthly possessions, a worn photograph of her deceased parents, a mother-of-pearl button from her mother's wedding dress, and 7 cents not enough for a meal, let alone a room. The thunder rolled across the prairie like a freight train, and Eliza closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the rough wood. She'd tried every respectable establishment in Cheyenne, but word traveled fast in the territories. One look at her, one whispered conversation behind a hand, and doors closed. "We don't hire her kind," they'd say, if they bothered to speak at all. Her kind, as if working as a housemaid in a boarding house of questionable reputation had branded her forever. She'd only cleaned rooms and washed linens, kept her head down and her virtue intact. But in the eyes of proper society, she might as well have been one of the working girls herself. When Mrs. Abernathy's establishment was shut down by the territorial marshal, all the women scattered like seeds on the wind. The others had somewhere to go. Eliza had nothing but the road. "You there?" The voice cut through the storm like a blade. Eliza's eyes snapped open to find a man on horseback, his oilskin coat streaming with rain. Even in the darkness, she could see the badge glinting on his chest, the deputy sheriff of Eden's Hollow. "This is private property," he said, not unkindly but with the weariness of authority. "Can't have vagrants sleeping against the church. Move along." "Please, sir," Eliza began, but pride strangled the words in her throat. She wouldn't beg. She'd done nothing wrong, and she wouldn't crawl for anyone's mercy. "I'll be gone by morning." "You'll be gone now," the deputy said. "There's a lean-to about 2 miles north, near Cooper's Creek. Nobody'll bother you there." 2 miles, in this storm. Eliza straightened her spine and stepped out from the church's protection into the full fury of the rain. "Thank you for your kindness," she said, unable to keep the bitter edge from her voice. She'd made it perhaps 50 yards when she heard the splash of hoofbeats behind her. Not the deputy, this was a heavier horse, moving slower. She didn't turn, didn't run. If someone meant her harm, there was little she could do about it in her condition. "Ma'am." The voice was deep, graveled, like it didn't get much use. Eliza turned to see a man sitting atop a large bay gelding. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair plastered to his head by the rain, and a face that might have been carved from the surrounding granite mountains. No badge, just a rancher, by the look of his worn leather chaps and the rope coiled at his saddle horn. "That's a long walk to Cooper's Creek," he said. "In this weather, it's a good way to catch your death." Eliza lifted her chin. "I've walked farther." He studied her for a long moment, rain streaming down his face. His eyes were gray as the storm clouds, and there was something in them, not pity, exactly, but a kind of recognition, like he knew what it meant to have nowhere to go. "My name's Jedediah Walker," he said finally. "Jed, I've got a ranch about 3 miles west. You could wait out the storm there." Every lesson Eliza had learned in her 24 years screamed against accepting. A strange man, a lonely road, an invitation that could mean anything. But the cold had settled so deep in her bones she could barely feel her feet, and the darkness at the edges of her vision suggested that Cooper's Creek might as well be on the moon. "I don't take charity," she said. "Didn't offer any." His voice remained steady, patient. "I've got 2 daughters at home. 6 and 3. Their mother passed last year, and I can't keep up with the house and the ranch both. Been looking for help, but..." He gestured toward town. "Most of the good women here have families of their own to tend." Eliza understood what he wasn't saying. He'd heard about her, perhaps, or maybe he just recognized desperation when he saw it. What kind of help? "Cooking, cleaning, mending, looking after the girls when I'm working the herd." He paused. "I can offer room and board, and $15 a month." It was a fair wage for a housekeeper. More than fair, given her circumstances. But Eliza had learned to be wary of fair offers from strange men. "What else?" she asked bluntly. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "Nothing else. I buried my wife 13 months ago. I'm not looking for anything but someone to help raise my daughters, right?" He shifted in his saddle. "I won't lie and say it'll be easy. The house needs work, and the girls... Emma hasn't spoken since her mother died. Claire acts more like a wildcat than a little girl most days. But it's honest work, and you'll have your own room." A crack of thunder made the horse sidestep nervously. Jed controlled it with an absent hand, still watching Eliza. "Why me?" she asked. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're standing in a thunderstorm, with nowhere to go," he said simply. "I know you've got pride enough to walk away from the church rather than argue. And I know you're asking the right questions instead of jumping at the first offer of shelter." He gathered his reins. "That tells me enough." Eliza stood there in the rain, weighing her options. Die of pneumonia on the road to Cooper's Creek, go back to town and face more closed doors, or take a chance on this stern-faced rancher who looked at her like she was a person instead of a scandal. "I don't want your pity," she said. "Don't have any to give." He extended his hand down to her. "Just a business arrangement. You need work, I need help. Nothing more complicated than that." She looked at his hand, calloused, scarred, steady despite the storm. Then she looked back at the road dissolving into mud, at the town that had already rejected her, at the endless night stretching ahead. Eliza May Thornton had survived 24 years by being careful, by keeping her distance, by trusting no one but herself. But sometimes, she thought as she reached up to grasp Jed Walker's hand, survival meant taking the risk of believing that not everyone in the world meant you harm. His grip was strong as he pulled her up behind him on the horse. She had to press close to his back to keep her seat, and she could feel the warmth of him even through their soaked clothing. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and the honest sweat of hard work. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into motion. They rode through the storm in silence. Eliza's arms wrapped around the waist of a stranger, heading toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in months, she wasn't walking alone. And that, she thought as Eden's Hollow disappeared behind them in the rain and darkness, had to count for something. The Walker Ranch emerged from the darkness like a ship run aground on the prairie. The main house was modest, a 2-story frame structure that had seen better days, with a wraparound porch missing several spindles and shutters hanging at tired angles. Lightning illuminated the barn and outbuildings, all bearing the same air of gentle neglect that comes when one person tries to do the work of two. Jed dismounted first, then helped Eliza down. Her legs nearly buckled from cold and exhaustion, but she forced herself to stand straight. He led her quickly to the porch, their boots thundering on the wooden boards. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared inside. A moment later, lamplight bloomed in the windows, warm and beckoning. He returned with a thick blanket, which he wrapped around her shoulders without ceremony. "Come in, I'll get the stove going." The front door opened directly into a parlor that might once have been welcoming. Now it felt hollow. Despite the furniture, a settee with faded roses, 2 ladder-backed chairs, a braided rug worn thin in the center. Everything was clean, but cheerless, as if the house itself was holding its breath. "The girls are sleeping," Jed said quietly, hanging his wet coat on a peg. "I'll introduce you proper in the morning." He led her to the kitchen, a large room dominated by a cast-iron stove and a scarred wooden table. Here, at least, there were signs of life, a child's drawing tacked to the wall, a rag doll forgotten on a chair, dishes draining by the sink. Jed knelt by the stove, feeding kindling into the firebox with practiced efficiency. "There's a room upstairs," he said without looking at her. "Last door on the right. It was—" He paused, his hand stilling for a moment. "It has a bed and a washstand. I'll bring up some dry clothes." Mr. Walker. Jed. He struck a match. An orange light danced across his weathered features. "Just Jed is fine. Jed." The name felt strange on her tongue. "I should know what you expect." Exactly what you expect. He stood, dusting his hands on his trousers, and met her gaze directly. "I expect you to cook 3 meals a day. Keep the house clean. Mend what needs mending. Look after Claire and Emma while I'm working." His expression was grave, almost severe. "I don't expect you to be their mother. They had one of those. I don't expect you to be anything to me but hired help. And I don't expect to know your business before you came here." The last part hung between them like a gift, or a warning. "That's all?" Eliza asked. "That's all." He moved past her to a cupboard, pulling out a tin of crackers and a wheel of cheese. "Eat something. You're swaying on your feet. I'll check on the girls and get those clothes." He left her alone in the kitchen with the crackers and cheese and the growing warmth of the stove. Eliza ate mechanically, her body demanding fuel even as her mind struggled to process this strange turn of fortune. The cheese was sharp and good, the crackers only slightly stale. She could hear footsteps overhead, Jed moving quietly, a door opening and closing. When he returned, he carried an armload of clothing, a brown wool dress, undergarments, thick stockings. They smelled of lavender and cedar, as if they'd been packed away with care. "These should fit well enough," he said, setting them on a chair. "The room's ready. We wake at 5:30. Breakfast at 6. He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Lock your door if it makes you feel safer. There's a bolt on the inside." Then he was gone, taking the lamp with him, leaving her to find her way by the glow from the stove. Eliza gathered the clothes and climbed the stairs, each step an effort. The hallway was dark, but she could see a thin line of light under one door, his room, she assumed. The last door on the right stood open, revealing a small bedroom with slanted walls and a single window. The bed was made with military precision, a patchwork quilt folded at the foot. The washstand held a china pitcher and bowl decorated with tiny blue flowers. On the dresser sat a silver-backed hairbrush and mirror, tarnished with disuse. This had been her room, the wife's, Anna's, though he hadn't said the name. Eliza closed the door and slid the bolt home, then changed into the dry clothes with shaking fingers. The dress hung loose on her thin frame, made for a woman who hadn't missed as many meals. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the quilt, and tried not to think about the woman who had stitched it. Morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Eliza woke in the gray pre-dawn, disoriented until the events of the night before crashed back. She dressed quickly, pinning her still damp hair into a simple bun, and made her way downstairs. Jed was already in the kitchen, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. He'd shaved and changed into clean work clothes, looking more respectable than he had in the storm, less like a desperate man making desperate choices. "Coffee's on the stove," he said. "I usually just do biscuits and gravy for breakfast. Maybe some eggs when the hens are laying good." Eliza poured herself a cup, grateful for the bitter heat of it. "I'll need to know what stores you have. Flour, salt pork, preserves." "Pantry's through there." He indicated a door beside the stove. "We're well stocked. I may not cook fancy, but I keep us fed." She was exploring the pantry, neatly organized. She noted with surprise when she heard light footsteps on the stairs. A moment later, a small face peered around the kitchen doorway. The older girl, Claire, with tangled brown hair and suspicious eyes the same gray as her father's. Who's she? Claire demanded, not bothering with good morning. This is Miss Thornton, Jed said calmly. She's going to help us with the house. Eliza, this is my daughter Claire. Claire edged into the kitchen, keeping the table between herself and Eliza. She wore a nightgown that had been hemmed more than once, and her feet were bare despite the cold floor. We don't need help, Claire announced. I can take care of Emma just fine. I know you can. Jed said, You've done a good job, but you need to be in school, not home all day. Claire's scowl deepened. Emma doesn't like strangers. As if summoned by her name, the younger girl appeared. Where Claire was all sharp angles and defiance, Emma was round and soft, with golden curls and huge blue eyes. She clutched a worn cloth rabbit to her chest and stayed in the doorway, thumb in her mouth. Emma, come say hello, Jed said gently. The child didn't move, didn't speak, just watched Eliza with those enormous eyes. She doesn't talk, Claire said, a challenge in her voice. Not since Mama died, so don't try to make her. Claire, Jed's voice carried a warning. Eliza set down her coffee cup and moved slowly, careful not to loom over the children. She crouched down, making herself smaller, less threatening. Hello, Claire. Hello, Emma, she said softly. That's a nice rabbit you have there. Emma, does it have a name? Emma blinked but didn't respond. Claire stepped protectively closer to her sister. His name is Mr. Hoppy. Claire said, and Emma doesn't let anyone touch him. That's good, Eliza said. Everyone needs something that's just theirs. She straightened, moving to the stove. Now, who wants to help me make breakfast? I bet you know where everything is better than I do. Claire hesitated, torn between hostility and the appeal of being needed. Papa likes his biscuits a certain way. Then you'll have to show me, Eliza said, tying on the apron she found hanging by the stove. I wouldn't want to do it wrong. For the next half hour, she let Claire direct her around the kitchen, pointing out where things were kept and how Papa liked his coffee, and how Emma would only eat eggs if they were scrambled soft. Emma trailed after them, silent as a shadow, watching everything with those solemn eyes. When they finally sat down to eat passable biscuits, gravy that could have used more pepper, eggs that passed Claire's inspection, Eliza noticed how Jed cut Emma's food into tiny pieces, how Claire kicked her sister gently under the table when she forgot to use her fork. I need to check the south pasture fence, Jed said, pushing back from the table. Storm might have brought some of it down. He looked at Eliza. You'll be all right. She nodded. We'll be fine. He hesitated, looking at his daughters. Claire, you mind Miss Thornton? Help her find things. Yes, Papa. But the look Claire shot Eliza suggested compliance was far from guaranteed. After Jed left, Eliza began clearing the table. Emma climbed down from her chair and disappeared into the parlor. Mr. Hoppy clutched tight. Claire stayed, watching. You're not our new mama, she said suddenly. No, Eliza agreed, scraping plates. I'm not. Papa said you're just here to help. That's right. Claire digested this. The last lady who came to help tried to kiss Papa. He sent her away the same day. Eliza's hand stilled for a moment. I'm not planning to kiss anyone. Good. Claire picked up a dish towel. I'll dry if you wash. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Claire said, Emma used to sing all the time. Mama taught her songs. Now she doesn't make any sound at all. That must be hard, Eliza said carefully. For both of you. Claire shrugged, but her thin shoulders were tense. The doctor said she might talk again someday, when she's ready. She glanced toward the parlor. I think she's scared if she talks. She'll forget Mama's voice. The child's insight was heartbreaking. Eliza handed her another plate to dry. Maybe she just needs to know it's safe, Eliza said. That no one's going to make her do anything before she's ready. Claire studied her with those two knowing eyes. Is that why you're here? Because you need somewhere safe? The question cut too close to the bone, but Eliza had learned that children often responded better to truth than to pretty lies. Something like that, she admitted. Claire nodded, apparently satisfied. Just don't scare Emma or make her cry. If you do, I'll put spiders in your bed. Noted, Eliza said solemnly. The rest of the morning passed in careful navigation. Eliza cleaned, letting Claire show her where everything belonged. Emma followed at a distance, occasionally venturing closer before retreating again. By noon, when Jed returned for lunch, the kitchen was spotless and soup simmered on the stove. Smells good, he said, washing up at the pump. Claire helped, Eliza said, and caught the girl's quick smile. They ate quietly, Emma managing a few spoonfuls of soup before pushing her bowl away. Jed talked about fence repair and which cows were due to calve soon. Normal talk, safe talk. As he prepared to leave again, he paused by Eliza's chair. They giving you any trouble? No trouble, she said, and meant it. These two small girls with their grief and their wariness were not trouble. They were just children missing their mother, trying to make sense of a world that had shifted beneath their feet. She understood that feeling all too well. The first trip to Eden's Hollow came on her second Saturday at the ranch. Eliza had made a list of needed supplies: thread for mending, soap for washing, some penny candy for the girls if Jed approved. She'd worn her best dress, the brown wool that had belonged to Anna, pressed and spotless despite its age. I can go alone, she'd offered when Jed brought the wagon around. Town folks need to see us together, he said simply. Get them used to the idea. Claire scrambled into the wagon bed with the agility of a squirrel, while Jed lifted Emma up beside her. The little one clutched Mr. Hoppy and pressed close to her sister. Eliza sat on the bench seat beside Jed, aware of the careful distance between them. The 3-mile journey passed quietly, broken only by Claire pointing out landmarks: the creek where she'd caught her first fish, the tree where a hawk nested every spring. Emma watched everything with those big eyes but made no sound. As they approached town, Eliza's stomach tightened. Eden's Hollow wasn't much one main street, a handful of businesses, perhaps 200 souls altogether. But small towns had long memories and sharp tongues. General store first, Jed said. Then the feed store for me. You need anything else? No, Eliza said, though she'd have liked to stop at the post office, to send word to, but no, there was no one waiting for word from her. Main Street was busy for a Saturday. Farmers in town for supplies, wives doing their shopping, children darting between wagons. Jed pulled up outside Garrett's general store and came around to help Eliza down. The gesture was purely practical, but she saw curtains twitch in the window above the store. Take your time, he said. I'll be at the feed store. Inside, the store smelled of pickle brine and coffee beans and new leather. Mrs. Garrett, a thin woman with steel-gray hair, stood behind the counter. Her smile faltered when she saw Eliza. May I help you? The temperature in her voice could have frozen the creek. I need thread, please, Eliza said evenly. Black and white, and a paper of pins. Mrs. Garrett moved to fetch the items, her back rigid with disapproval. Two women examining bolts of fabric near the window whispered behind their hands. Eliza recognized one Mrs. Davies, the banker's wife. Their eyes met briefly before Mrs. Davies turned away with a sniff. That all, Mrs.? Garrett asked, wrapping the purchases with sharp movements. 2 peppermint sticks as well, please. For the Walker girls, Mrs. Garrett's eyes narrowed. Poor little mites, lost their mother so young. Yes, Eliza said, refusing to rise to the bait. Some say it's not proper. A young woman alone in that house with a widower. Mrs. Garrett's voice carried deliberately. Some say a decent woman would have found other arrangements. Eliza counted out her coins carefully. Some people say a great many things. Good day, Mrs. Garrett. She turned to find Claire standing in the doorway, her small face fierce. "Papa's looking for you," the girl announced loudly. "He said to hurry up because Emma's getting fretful." Eliza followed Claire out, aware of the eyes tracking their movement. On the boardwalk, Claire slipped her hand into Eliza's. "Mrs. Garrett's mean," Claire said. "Mama used to say she had vinegar for blood." "Claire, it's true. She said nasty things about Mama, too, when Papa first brought her here from Denver." Claire looked up at her. "Mama was a school teacher before she married Papa. Mrs. Garrett said she was putting on airs." They found Jed loading feed sacks into the wagon, his jaw tight. Emma sat on the wagon seat, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "What happened?" Eliza asked. "Nothing," Jed said curtly, but Claire was already talking. "Jimmy Morrison said Emma's touched in the head 'cause she won't talk. Said she belongs in an asylum." Eliza's hands clenched. She climbed into the wagon and gathered Emma onto her lap, feeling the child's trembling through her thin dress. "Did you hit him?" she asked Claire. "Tried to. Papa stopped me." Claire sounded deeply aggrieved. "Violence doesn't solve anything," Jed said, but without much conviction. "Sometimes it makes you feel better," Eliza murmured, stroking Emma's hair. The child burrowed closer, her tears soaking through Eliza's bodice. Jed's mouth twitched almost a smile. "Don't encourage her. Claire's already too quick with her fists." They stopped at only one more place, the feed store, where Mr. Holcomb greeted Jed warmly and tipped his hat to Eliza without judgment. A small kindness, but Eliza treasured it. The ride home was subdued. Emma had cried herself to sleep against Eliza's shoulder, and Claire sat unusually quiet in the back. As they turned up the lane to the ranch, Jed finally spoke. "It won't be easy. Town folks, they talk." "I'm aware," Eliza said. "It might be worse for you than before, whatever before was." She looked down at Emma's sleeping face, at Claire's protective posture. "I've survived worse than whispers." That evening, after supper, Eliza worked on the mending while the girls played on the parlor rug. Jed sat at his desk in the corner, going over the ranch ledgers. It was almost peaceful, almost like a real family, if you didn't look too close. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. Jed answered it, his body blocking Eliza's view of the visitor. "Evening, Jed." A woman's voice, honey sweet. "I brought a cake. Thought you might enjoy something sweet after that scene in town today." "That's kind of you, Mrs. Morrison." "Mrs. Morrison, the late Reverend's widow." She swept into the parlor in a rustle of black taffeta, carrying a cake that could have fed 12. Her eyes found Eliza immediately, taking in every detail from her mended dress to her work-worn hands. "You must be the new housekeeper." She made the words sound like something found under a rock. "Yes, ma'am." Eliza set aside her sewing and stood. "How enterprising of you, Mrs." Morrison turned back to Jed, dismissing Eliza entirely. "I do worry about you out here. Jed, a man in your position needs proper guidance, the right kind of feminine influence for his children." "We're managing fine," Jed said. "Are you?" Her voice dripped concern. "Poor little Emma, still not speaking. And Claire, getting into fights. Perhaps what they need is a proper mother figure, someone of good standing in the community." Claire, who'd been quietly building blocks with Emma, stood up. "We don't want a new mother. We have Miss Eliza." "Mrs." Morrison's smile could have curdled milk. "Of course, dear, for now." She turned to Jed. "I'll leave the cake. Do think about what I said. A man has to consider his children's future, their reputation in town." After she left, the parlor felt smaller, the air heavier. Jed stood by the closed door like he was guarding against her return. "She wants to marry you," Claire announced. "Claire, it's true. Everyone knows it. She's been bringing cakes and casseroles since the week after Mama's funeral. Eliza gathered her sewing, preparing to give them privacy, but Jed's voice stopped her. Stay. He moved back to his desk. No secrets in this house. They settled back into their evening rhythm, but the peace was fractured. When Eliza tucked the girls into bed later, Claire clutched her hand. You won't leave because of what people say, will you? I'm tougher than I look, Eliza assured her. Promise. Eliza hesitated. Promises were dangerous things. But looking at Claire's anxious face, Emma's watchful eyes, she couldn't help herself. I promise. Later, cleaning up the kitchen, she found Jed there, staring at Mrs. Morrison's untouched cake. Throw it to the pigs, he said. They're less particular about what they eat. That seems wasteful. Waste would be pretending kindness lives in that cake. He met her eyes. I know what they're saying in town. About you, about why you're here. You don't owe me explanations. Maybe not, but I owe you truth. He ran a hand through his hair. Anna, my wife, she struggled after Emma was born. Not her body, her mind. She'd cry for no reason, forget to eat, stare at walls for hours. Town folks said she was weak, delicate, said I should send her away to get better. Eliza waited, sensing the weight of these words. I didn't send her away. I kept her home, hired help, tried to manage. She seemed to improve, but... He stared at his hands. She drowned in the creek. Same creek Claire showed you today. Water wasn't even deep. Doctor said it was an accident. The unspoken question hung between them. I wasn't there, Jed continued. I was fixing fence in the north pasture. Claire was at school. Emma was napping. Anna said she was going for a walk. Needed air. I should have gone with her. Should have known. You couldn't have known, Eliza said softly. Maybe, maybe not. But town folks, they whispered then too. Said I drove her to it. Said I should have seen the signs. His laugh was bitter. Now they whisper about you. About what kind of woman comes to work for a man with my history. I've heard worse whispers, Eliza said. At least yours come from tragedy, not scandal. He studied her face. We all have our ghosts, I suppose. Yes, she agreed. We do. He stood, moving toward the door, then paused. That promise you made, Claire, about staying. Don't make it if you can't keep it. They've lost enough. I know, Eliza said. I meant it. He nodded and left her alone with the lamp and the untouched cake and the weight of shared sorrows. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like gossips at their doors. But inside the house, for now, there was only quiet understanding and the fragile hope that broken people might build something whole together. The evening routine had settled into a comfortable pattern by Eliza's third week at the ranch. After supper dishes were done and Jed retreated to his ledgers, she would gather the girls in the parlor for what Claire called story time. Tonight, Emma had climbed into Eliza's lap without prompting a small victory that made her heart swell. Which story tonight? Eliza asked, smoothing Emma's golden curls. The one about the princess who can't talk, Claire said, settling on the floor with her rag doll. Emma likes that one. Eliza had been making up stories tailored to the girls' needs, tales of silent princesses who found other ways to communicate, of brave sisters who protected each other, of families rebuilt from sadness. Tonight, she wove a story about a princess whose voice was stolen by a jealous fairy, but who learned to speak through drawings and gestures until true love's kiss from her baby sister returned her voice. Emma listened with rapt attention, her blue eyes never leaving Eliza's face, as the story reached its end, with the princess singing again. Emma's lips moved slightly, as if tasting the shape of words. See? Claire whispered. She's trying. Eliza pressed a gentle kiss to Emma's forehead. There's no hurry, sweet girl. Words will come when you're ready. From his desk, Jed watched them over his ledgers. Eliza had grown accustomed to his quiet observation. the way he studied his daughters with a mixture of love and helplessness. She began the nightly ritual of preparing the girls for bed, aware of his eyes following their progress up the stairs. Emma's room was small and painted yellow. Anna's doing. Claire had explained. She said it would be like sunshine. The walls held pencil marks measuring growth, stopping abruptly at a height that suggested Emma had been measured just weeks before her mother's death. As Eliza tucked the quilt around Emma, the child suddenly grabbed her hand. Her mouth opened, working silently, urgently. Then, so soft Eliza almost missed it. "Mama." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Eliza's breath caught. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she said it again. "Stronger, Mama." "Oh, sweetheart." Eliza gathered the child close, feeling the small body tremble. "I heard you. What a beautiful voice you have." Claire appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "Emma, did she?" "Mama," Emma whispered again, pointing at Eliza. The weight of that single word, that gesture, nearly broke Eliza's composure. She met Claire's shocked gaze over Emma's head, seeing her own turmoil reflected there. "Should I get Papa?" Claire asked. "In a moment," Eliza managed. "Let's just let her be for now." She held Emma until the child's breathing deepened into sleep, that one word echoing in the silence. Mama. Not her mama, but Mama nonetheless. The responsibility of it terrified her. When she finally emerged from Emma's room, she found Jed waiting in the hall, Claire beside him. His face was carefully neutral, but his hands were clenched at his sides. "Claire told me," he said quietly. "I didn't encourage it," Eliza said quickly. "I would never presume." "I know." His voice was rough. "Just, what did you do?" "Nothing special, just told her a story, like every night." He studied her face in the dim lamplight. "Anna used to tell them stories, every night, just like that." He swallowed hard. "Thank you." "For what?" "For bringing her voice back, even if—" He stopped, shook his head. "Just thank you." The next morning, Emma didn't speak at breakfast, but she hummed just a few notes, barely audible. Claire nearly knocked over her milk in excitement. Jed's hands trembled as he cut Emma's pancakes. The child had found her voice, even if she wasn't ready to use it fully yet. But the miracle of Emma's first word was overshadowed that afternoon by an unexpected visitor. Eliza was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching, several of them. Her stomach dropped as she recognized the lead rider. Charles Whitlock sat his horse like a man accustomed to looking down on others. His suit was too fine for ranch country, his smile too practiced. Behind him rode two other men, their faces unfamiliar, but their type well known to Eliza, the kind of men who did whatever Whitlock paid them to do. "Well, well," Whitlock said, dismounting with theatrical flair. "Eliza May Thornton. I heard rumors you'd landed on your feet, but I had to see for myself." Eliza forced her hands to stay steady on the wet sheet she held. "Mr. Whitlock, you're a long way from Cheyenne." "Business brings me all over the territory." He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. "Imagine my surprise when I heard you'd found yourself a position, a respectable position, no less." "I'm a housekeeper," she said evenly. "Nothing more." "Of course." His smile was sharp as glass. "Though some might wonder what qualifications you gained at Mrs. Abernathy's that prepared you for domestic service." The back door opened. Claire stood there, eyes narrowed. "Miss Eliza Papa wants to know if you need anything from the smokehouse." A lie. Jed was in the far pasture, but Claire had sensed trouble with the instincts of a child who'd learned early that the world could be dangerous. "Tell him I'm fine," Eliza said, just finishing the laundry. Claire didn't move. "He said if you needed help with anything, I should come get him right away. He's just in the barn." Another lie, but Whitlock didn't know that. His eyes flicked between Eliza and the fierce-faced child. "Run along, little girl," he said dismissively. "I don't take orders from you." Claire shot back. "This is our land. You're trespassing." Whitlock's face darkened. One of his men shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his hip. Eliza stepped between them and Claire. "The child's right," she said. "This is private property. State your business or leave." "My business," Whitlock laughed, an ugly sound. "My business is making sure good people know what kind of woman they've welcomed into their homes. The kind who lived under Mrs. Abernathy's roof for 2 years. The kind who scrubbed floors and washed laundry." Eliza interrupted. "The kind who worked honest jobs when honest jobs were scarce. If you have accusations to make them. Otherwise, get off this land." "Fierce little thing. Aren't you? You weren't so fierce when you begged Mrs. Abernathy for work, when you had nowhere else to go." The words stung because they were true. She had begged. She had been desperate. But desperation wasn't a sin, whatever men like Whitlock believed. "Papa!" Claire's shout made everyone turn. Jed was riding in fast from the east pasture, rifle across his saddle. He must have seen the strangers from the ridge. As he drew closer, Eliza saw his face calm, controlled, dangerous. "Gentlemen," he said, reining in his horse. "Something I can help you with." "Just passing through," Whitlock said smoothly. "Happen to recognize Miss Thornton. We're old acquaintances." "That's so." Jed's eyes never left Whitlock's face. "Well, you've passed through. Best keep riding." "Of course, though I feel it's my Christian duty to warn you. Mr. Jed's voice was soft, which somehow made it more threatening. "I've got 2 daughters in that house. 2 little girls who've been through enough. Now, you can ride off my land peaceful, or I can help you off. Your choice." Whitlock's hired men shifted nervously. They knew the look of a man who meant what he said. Whitlock forced another smile. "No need for unpleasantness. Just thought you should know what kind of woman you've hired, for your daughter's sake." "I know exactly who I hired." Jed said, "A woman who works hard, treats my girls with kindness, and minds her own business, which is more than I can say for some." The 2 men locked eyes for a long moment. Then Whitlock mounted his horse with stiff movements. "You've been warned," he said. "When scandal comes calling, remember that." They rode off in a cloud of dust. Jed dismounted and handed his reins to Claire. "Take Dusty to the barn. Sweetheart, give him extra oats." Claire led the horse away, but not before shooting Eliza a look of fierce pride. When they were alone, Jed turned to her. "You all right?" "Fine." But her hands were shaking now, the delayed reaction hitting hard. "Who was he?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "Someone who knew me in Cheyenne. Someone who thinks he knows what I am." "And what's that?" She met his eyes, chin lifted. "A woman who worked where she could to survive, who kept herself fed when the world wanted her to starve, who did nothing wrong except exist in proximity to those who did." Jed nodded slowly. "Come inside. You're white as a sheet." In the kitchen, he poured her coffee with hands steadier than hers. Emma sat at the table, coloring with the precious paper and pencils Eliza had bought with her own wages. The child looked up at their entrance and smiled a real smile, unstudied and bright. "Mama," she said clearly, holding up her drawing. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands, with what might have been a 4th figure floating above them like a guardian angel. Eliza's eyes burned. This child, these children, this man who defended her without question, how had she stumbled into this? How had she found exactly what she never dared hope for? "It's beautiful," she managed. Jed studied the drawing, his expression soft. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled another piece of paper from the drawer and a pencil. "Draw me, too," he told Emma. "Put me next to Miss Eliza." Emma happily complied, adding a tall stick figure with what might have been a hat as she drew humming tunelessly. Jed spoke quiet words meant just for Eliza. "He'll be back." Men like that. They don't give up easy when they think they've got power over someone. "I know," Eliza said. "We'll handle it," he said, and the "we" warmed her more than the coffee. "You're not alone here?" No, she thought, watching Emma draw their little makeshift family. She wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to face whatever storms were coming. That night, as she prepared for bed, she found something on her dresser, a small wooden carving of a bird, wings spread in flight. Beneath it, a note in Jed's careful script. "For bringing back her voice, for staying when you could run, Jay." Eliza held the little bird, feeling the smooth wood warm in her palm. Outside her window, the real birds were settling for the night, their evening songs fading into darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new whispers, new threats. But tonight, in this house that was learning to live again, she had found something worth fighting for. "Mama," she whispered to herself, tasting the weight of that word. Not quite true, not quite false, but something in between, something that might, with time and care and courage, grow into truth. The poison Charles Whitlock had promised bred through Eden's Hollow like wildfire in dry grass. Within 2 days of his visit, Eliza noticed the changes. At the general store, conversation stopped when she entered. Women pulled their children close when she passed on the street. Even Mr. Holcomb at the feed store, who had always been kind, could barely meet her eyes. But it was the children who delivered the cruelest blow. Eliza had taken the girls to town for Claire's weekly piano lesson with Mrs. Pemberton. Emma, speaking more each day, though still in whispers, had been excited to show off Mr. Hoppy's new dress that Eliza had sewn. They were early, so they waited in the small parlor where other students gathered. "My mama says we can't play with you anymore," little Sally Morrison announced when Claire greeted her. "She says your house isn't decent." Claire's face went red. "That's a lie." "It's not," insisted Margaret Davies, older at 8 and smugly confident. "My mother says that woman living with you isn't fit to be around children. She says—" "Stop it," Claire said, her fists clenching. "She used to work in a bad place," Margaret continued, emboldened by her audience. "A place where fallen women—" Claire launched herself at Margaret with a wild cry. The 2 girls went down in a tangle of limbs and flying ribbons. Emma shrieked and buried her face in Eliza's skirts as the other children scattered. "Claire, no!" Eliza pulled the girls apart, holding Claire back as she struggled to get at Margaret again. "Mrs. Pemberton appeared in the doorway, her face white with shock. "Miss Thornton, control that child immediately." "She said horrible things," Claire shouted, tears streaming down her face. "She's a liar." "Claire Walker, you are no longer welcome in my home." "Mrs. Pemberton said coldly, "I cannot have violence in my parlor, and frankly, given the circumstances, I think it best if we discontinue lessons entirely." Eliza lifted her chin. Claire was defending her family. "Perhaps you should teach your students kindness along with their scales. Do not presume to lecture me on propriety." "Mrs. Pemberton snapped. "Not when you—" She stopped herself, but her meaning was clear. Eliza gathered both girls and left, Claire still shaking with rage. Emma silent again, clutching Mr. Hoppy so tightly her knuckles were white. The ride home was quiet, except for Claire's occasional hiccuping sobs. Jed was in the barn when they returned, much earlier than expected. He took one look at Claire's tear-stained face and Eliza's rigid posture, and his jaw tightened. "What happened?" "I hit Margaret Davies," Claire confessed. "But she deserved it. She said—" Fresh tears came. "The piano lessons are over," Eliza said quietly. "Mrs. Pemberton has declined to continue teaching Claire." Jed knelt in front of his daughter. "Claire, Look at me. What exactly did Margaret say? Claire glanced at Eliza, then back at her father. Bad things, about Miss Eliza, about why she's here. Sally Morrison said we're not decent anymore. Something dangerous flashed in Jed's eyes. He stood slowly, his hand gentle on Claire's head. Go inside. Help Miss Eliza with supper. But Papa. Inside. Claire. They went, but Eliza glanced back to see Jed standing very still, fists clenched at his sides. She knew that stillness. It was the calm before a storm. That evening, Sheriff Clayton arrived. Tom Clayton was a fair man, one of the few in town who judged people by their actions rather than gossip. But his expression was grave as he accepted Jed's offer of coffee. I'm here unofficially, he said, as a friend. Spit it out, Tom. Jed said, There's talk, more than talk. Charles Whitlock's been making the rounds, telling anyone who'll listen about Miss Thornton's past employment. Some of the town council members are concerned. Concerned about what? Jed's voice was dangerously quiet. About the propriety of the situation? An unmarried woman, living here. Tom looked uncomfortable. There's been mention of the children's welfare, whether they're in a suitable environment. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. They're suggesting... No one's suggesting anything yet, Tom said quickly. But Whitlock's stirring folks up. Judge Harrison owes him money from a business deal gone bad. If Whitlock pushes, if enough townspeople complain, they could try to take my girls. Jed's voice was flat. Tom nodded reluctantly. It's been done before. You remember the Carlson case? Eliza did remember. A widower whose sister-in-law had been deemed unfit to help raise his children because she'd been divorced. The children were sent to live with distant relatives. What do you suggest? Jed asked. Tom shifted uncomfortably. The easiest solution would be if Miss Thornton found other employment, elsewhere. No. Claire stood in the doorway, Emma beside her. She can't leave. She promised. Girls, go upstairs. Jed said, No. Claire's voice rose. Everyone wants to take people away from us. First Mama, now Miss Eliza. It's not fair. Claire, Eliza started, but the girl ran to her, wrapping her arms around Eliza's waist. You promised, she said, voice muffled. You promised you wouldn't leave. Emma joined her sister, her small arms circling Eliza's knees. Mama, stay, she whispered. Please. Tom Clayton looked away, clearly moved. Jed's face was stone, but his eyes burned. There might be another way, Tom said slowly. If the concern is propriety. He didn't finish, but his meaning was clear. Eliza felt Jed stiffen beside her. I should go, Tom said, standing. I just wanted to warn you. As a friend, whatever you decide, decide quickly. Whitlock's not a patient man. After he left, the kitchen was silent except for the tick of the clock. The girls still clung to Eliza, and she stroked their hair absently, her mind racing. Girls, go wash up for bed, Jed said finally. But Papa? Now, Claire. They went reluctantly, casting worried glances back. When their footsteps faded upstairs, Jed spoke. You could leave. Tonight, I'd give you wages enough to get far from here. Start fresh somewhere Whitlock can't find you. Is that what you want? Eliza asked. What I want isn't the issue. It's what's best for the girls. And you think losing someone else they've grown to love is what's best? He flinched. Better than losing them entirely. There's another option, Eliza said carefully. Tom suggested it. Marriage. The word fell between them like a stone in still water. It would stop the talk, make everything proper in the town's eyes. Jed laughed bitterly. A business arrangement. We already have that, Eliza pointed out. This would just make it legal. He studied her face. You'd do that, bind yourself to a man you barely know. to a life you didn't choose. I chose to come here. I chose to stay. The girls. She paused, searching for words. They've given me something I never expected to have. A place, a purpose. If marriage keeps us together, keeps them safe, then yes, I'd do that. And what about love? He asked quietly. What about happiness? I've lived without both for a long time, Eliza said. But I've never lived with the kind of peace I've found here. That's worth more than romance. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, you'd be tied to me, to my reputation, my past. There are those who still whisper about Anna's death, who blame me. And there are those who whisper about my past. Perhaps we're well matched in scandal. That drew a small, unexpected smile from him. Anna would have liked you, he said. She had the same steel under her softness. They stood in the lamplight, two damaged people considering a practical solution to an impossible situation. It wasn't how little girls dreamed of marriage proposals, but then Eliza had stopped dreaming little girl dreams long ago. Sleep on it, Jed said finally. Both of us. If you still think it's the best solution in the morning, we'll go see Reverend Harris in Willow Creek. He doesn't care much for town gossip. Eliza nodded and turned to go upstairs. At the doorway, she paused. Jed, whatever we decide, I want you to know these weeks here, they've been the best of my life. The girls, this home, even you with your silence and your grief. It's been real in a way nothing else ever was. He looked at her, and for a moment she saw past his careful control to the lonely man beneath. For us too, he said roughly. For all of us. Upstairs, she found both girls in Claire's bed, whispering urgently. They went silent when she entered. We're not asleep, Claire announced unnecessarily. I can see that. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed. You're worried. Are you going away? Claire asked. No, Eliza said firmly. Whatever happens, I'm not leaving you. Promise. This from Emma, her voice small but clear. I already promised. I don't break my promises. Claire studied her with those two wise eyes. You and Papa were talking about something important. Yes, about how to make people stop being mean. Something like that. Emma snuggled closer. Papa's sad, she whispered, but not as sad as before. No, Eliza agreed. Not as sad as before. She tucked them in, kissing each forehead, and went to her own room. Her window faced east, toward town, toward all those proper people with their proper lives and their vicious whispers. But it also faced the sunrise. Tomorrow would come, bringing with it decisions that would change everything. She thought about Jed's question. What about love? What about happiness? Maybe love wasn't always passion and poetry. Maybe sometimes it was choosing to stay. Maybe happiness wasn't a feeling, but a practice, built day by day through small acts of care. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, lonely and wild. But here in this house, imperfect and grieving but determinedly alive, Eliza had found her pack, and she would fight to keep it, whatever the cost. The wooden bird Jed had carved sat on her dresser, wings spread in eternal flight. But Eliza was done flying. It was time to build a nest, even if the foundation was scandal and the frame was necessity. Even the strangest materials, she thought, could make a home if you were desperate enough. And she was. They all were. Perhaps that was enough to start with. The town meeting was called for Friday evening at the church hall. Word spread quickly through Eden's Hollow. The widower rancher with the questionable housekeeper would be the main topic of discussion. Some saw it as their Christian duty to protect the Walker children. Others simply enjoyed the spectacle of public judgment. Eliza wanted to stay home with the girls, but Jed insisted she come. They want to talk about you. They can do it to your face, he said grimly, adjusting his collar. He'd put on his Sunday suit, the one he wore for funerals and important business. Eliza wore Anna's best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes. Claire had insisted on braiding her hair that morning, weaving in small wildflowers despite the somber occasion. Mrs. Holcomb from the Mercantile had agreed to watch the girls, one of the few townspeople still willing to associate with them. As they prepared to leave, Claire grabbed Eliza's hand. "You'll come back?" she asked anxiously. "We'll both come back," Jed said firmly. "Together." The church hall was already crowded when they arrived. Conversation stuttered to a halt as they entered, then resumed in hushed whispers. Eliza kept her head high, matching Jed's steady pace to the front of the room. They sat in the first row of chairs, facing the makeshift panel of town council members. Judge Harrison presided, his florid face already flushed with importance. To his right sat Mrs. Morrison, the Reverend's widow, looking sanctimonious in her black silk. Charles Whitlock lounged to the left, a satisfied smirk playing at his lips. The rest of the council filled out the panel: the banker Davies, Doc Hartley, and surprisingly, Sheriff Clayton, who looked uncomfortable with the whole proceedings. "We're here tonight to discuss a matter of community concern," Judge Harrison began pompously. "The welfare of our children must always be our primary consideration." "Then why aren't we discussing the Morrison boy who's been stealing from Garrett's store?" someone called from the back. "Or the Davis twins who set fire to the Hendersons' haystack?" "Order!" Harrison banged his gavel. "We're here to discuss the Walker situation." "What situation would that be?" Jed stood, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "The situation where I'm raising my daughters with the help of a capable housekeeper, where my girls are fed, clothed, clean, and cared for." "The situation," Mrs. Morrison interjected, "where you've installed a woman of questionable reputation in your home, a woman who lived in a establishment of ill repute." "I worked as a laundress and maid," Eliza said, standing beside Jed. "Nothing more." "So you say," Whitlock drawled. "But we all know what kind of women lived under Mrs. Abernathy's roof. The company you kept speaks for itself." "Does it?" Eliza's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "Then what does your company say about you, Mr. Whitlock? You who frequented that establishment regularly, who knew every woman there by name?" Whitlock's face darkened. "I was there on business." "What business requires weekly visits to a boarding house?" Eliza pressed. "What business requires private meetings with Mrs. Abernathy?" "Enough!" Harrison banged his gavel again. "We're not here to discuss Mr. Whitlock's affairs." "No, just mine," Eliza said bitterly. "How convenient." Jed stepped forward. "My wife died 13 months ago. My youngest daughter stopped speaking. My eldest started fighting anyone who looked at her wrong. I couldn't manage the ranch and the house and the girls alone. I hired help, that's all." "But the propriety, Mrs. Morrison began. "What's improper about it?" Jed challenged. "Miss Thornton has her own room. She works for wages. She's brought nothing but good to my home. The child calls her Mama," someone whispered loudly enough to be heard. "Yes," Jed said simply. "Emma started speaking again because of Miss Thornton's patience and kindness. If that's improper, then I'll take impropriety over silence." Doc Hartley cleared his throat. "From a medical standpoint, the children appear to be thriving. Emma's selective mutism was concerning, but she's made remarkable progress." "That's not the point," Mrs. Morrison insisted. "It's about moral influence. What values are these girls learning?" "They're learning kindness." A clear voice spoke from the back. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry with her husband. She rarely spoke at town meetings, but her voice was firm now. "Last week, Miss Thornton brought the girls to help fold clothes when I was overwhelmed with orders. No pay wanted, just teaching the children to help neighbors." "And she helped during the Stevenson birth," added Mrs. Carter, the midwife. "Stayed all night, boiling water and tending the other children without being asked." "She taught my boy his letters," another woman said. "He wouldn't learn from anyone else. but she was patient with him. Whitlock stood abruptly. "This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the facts. This woman lived among prostitutes. She—" "Choose your next words very carefully." Jed's voice was quiet, dangerous. "You're talking about a lady." "A lady?" Whitlock laughed. "She's no more a lady than—" The sound of Jed's fist connecting with Whitlock's jaw was loud in the shocked silence. Whitlock went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. Jed stood over him, fists still clenched. "I warned you." The hall erupted in chaos. Women gasped, men shouted. Sheriff Clayton moved to separate the combatants. But before he could reach them, Eliza stepped between Jed and the fallen Whitlock. "Enough," she said quietly. "This isn't helping." She turned to face the crowd. Blood from Whitlock's nose spattered on her blue dress. "You want to know what I am? Fine. I'm a woman who lost her parents at 19, who worked in factories until my hands bled, then lost that job when the owner's son wouldn't take no for an answer, who took the only position I could find that offered room and board, yes, at Mrs. Abernathy's, who scrubbed floors and washed sheets and kept my dignity intact despite what you all want to believe." The hall had gone quiet, everyone straining to hear. "I'm a woman who came to this town with nothing but hope for honest work, who found a grieving family and tried to help them heal, who grew to love 2 little girls who needed someone to mother them." Her voice broke slightly. "Who dared to believe I could have a decent life despite my past." She looked directly at Mrs. Morrison. "You speak of moral influence, I'll match mine against anyone's. I've never lied, never stolen, never betrayed a trust. I've worked for every meal I've eaten. Can everyone here say the same?" Sheriff Clayton helped Whitlock to his feet. The man's nose was definitely broken, his fine shirt ruined. "I'll have you arrested for assault," he sputtered at Jed. "Try it," Clayton said mildly. "Though I didn't see any assault. Looked like you walked into a door to me." "This is corruption," Whitlock raged. "You're all being fooled by a pretty face and sad story." "No," a new voice spoke up. Reverend Harris from Willow Creek had entered quietly during the commotion. "We're being shown the difference between judgment and justice." He walked to the front, his weathered face kind. "I've been asked to speak to this matter. Mr. Walker came to see me yesterday about performing a marriage ceremony." The crowd buzzed with this news. Eliza felt Jed tense beside her. "I asked him why he wanted to marry," Harris continued. "Do you know what he said? Not that it would quiet gossip or satisfy propriety. He said, 'Because my girls need her, because we're already a family in every way that matters, because she makes us whole.'" He looked around the room. "That sounds like the foundation of a godly marriage to me. Better than many I've performed for couples who had all the respectability in the world but none of the caring." "You'd marry them?" Judge Harrison asked, scandalized. "I did marry them," Harris said calmly. "This morning, at sunrise, Mr. and Mrs. Walker came to me with pure intentions and honest hearts. Who was I to deny them God's blessing?" The hall exploded again. Eliza turned to Jed in shock they hadn't gone to Willow Creek, but his eyes met hers steadily, and she saw the truth there. He'd gone alone, prepared everything, given her the choice without pressure. "It's not legal without her presence," Harrison began. "She was present," Harris said. "Both parties spoke their vows freely. Sheriff Clayton here served as witness, along with Mrs. Chen, all perfectly legal." Clayton nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Mrs. Chen stood straighter, daring anyone to challenge her involvement. "This is conspiracy," Whitlock shouted. "The whole town's gone mad." "The only madness here is yours," Jed said. He took Eliza's hand, his touch gentle despite his earlier violence. "My wife and I will be going home now. To our daughters, our family. Anyone who has a problem with that knows where to find me." He led her through the crowd, which parted like the Red Sea. Some faces showed shock, others approval. A few even smiled. At the door, Eliza turned back. "I made a promise to those girls," she said clearly. "To stay, to be there for them. Today I made another promise to their father, to be a faithful wife and a good mother. I keep my promises, all of them." Outside, in the cool evening air, Eliza's legs finally gave out. Jed caught her, holding her steady against his chest. "You married me without me," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I gave you the choice," he said. "Harris agreed to draw up the papers. Backdate them to this morning. All you have to do is sign or not. If you don't want this, we'll figure out another way." She pulled back to look at his face. "You did this for the girls." "I did it for all of us," he admitted, "including me. These weeks. Eliza, you've brought something back to life I thought was dead forever." "What's that?" "Hope," he said simply. "Home. The feeling that tomorrow might be better than today." She thought of Claire's fierce protectiveness, Emma's whispered mama, quiet evenings by the fire, shared sorrows and small joys, not a romance from storybooks, but something real and solid and worth fighting for. "Where do I sign?" she asked. He smiled then, truly smiled, and it transformed his face. "Let's go home first. The girls will be worried." They walked to the wagon hand in hand, married in the eyes of God and law, if not yet in truth. Behind them, the town hall still buzzed with outrage and gossip. But ahead lay the ranch, where two little girls waited, where a life cobbled together from broken pieces was slowly becoming whole. "Thank you," Eliza said as he helped her into the wagon, "for standing up for me, for fighting for us." "Always," he said simply. "That's what family does." As they drove away, Eliza looked back once at the lit windows of the hall. Let them talk, she thought. Let them judge. She had something they couldn't understand, a place where she belonged. People who needed her, a future built on truth rather than pretense. She was Eliza Walker now. Wife, mother, partner. The transformation complete not through passion but through choice. Not through dreams but through duty, transformed into love. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The wind that night carried the bitter promise of an early winter, rattling the windows and making the old house creak. Eliza couldn't sleep, her mind still reeling from the events at the town hall. She lay in her narrow bed, still her bed, despite the marriage certificate with her signature now resting in Jed's desk drawer, and listened to the storm building outside. Near midnight, she heard something else above the wind, the acrid smell of smoke. She flew from her bed, feet bare on the cold floor. The smell was stronger in the hallway. Not the house, it was coming from outside. She ran to the window and saw at the barn, flames already licking at the roof despite the wind-driven rain. "Jed!" She pounded on his door. "Fire!" He emerged instantly, fully dressed as if he'd been lying awake too. One look out the window and he was moving, pulling on his boots. "Stay with the girls," he ordered, but Eliza was already running downstairs. "The horses," she said. "Shadow." Shadow, Jed's prize stallion, the horse that had belonged to Anna. The other horses too, their livelihood, their future. "I'll get them." He grabbed his coat. "You stay here." But Eliza was already wrapping a shawl around her nightgown, shoving her feet into boots. "Two of us can save more than one." "Eliza." "We don't have time to argue." They ran together into the storm. The barn was fully engulfed on the north side, flames fighting against the rain but winning. The horses were screaming, trapped in their stalls, panic making them dangerous. Jed went for the workhorses nearest the flames. Eliza ran for Shadow's stall at the far end. The black stallion was rearing, eyes rolling white with terror. Smoke filled her lungs as she fumbled with the latch. "Easy, boy," she coughed, dodging his hooves. "Easy now." The latch finally gave. Shadow burst out, nearly trampling her in his desperation to escape. She grabbed his halter, using all her strength to direct him toward the door and safety. Once outside, he broke free and galloped into the darkness. But he was alive. Back inside, the smoke was thicker. She could hear Jed coughing somewhere in the chaos. 2 mares remained in the middle stalls, both frantic with fear. Eliza got the first one out, the mare's coat singed but otherwise unhurt. The second mare wouldn't budge. Terror had frozen her, and she pressed against the back of her stall despite the approaching flames. Eliza climbed over the stall door, speaking nonsense comfort words through her raw throat. The heat was unbearable now, her left hand blistering where she gripped the metal latch. "Come on, girl," she pleaded, tugging at the mare's halter. "Please." A timber crashed down behind them, showering sparks. The mare finally bolted, dragging Eliza with her. They burst from the barn just as part of the roof collapsed, flames roaring into the night sky. Jed appeared through the smoke, leading the last of the workhorses. His face was black with soot, a burn angry and red along his jaw. "That's all of them," he said hoarsely, then saw her hand. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." But the pain was making her dizzy now that the crisis had passed. They stood together watching their barn burn, rain and tears making tracks through the soot on their faces. Behind them, Claire's voice, "Papa." Both girls stood on the porch. Misses. Holcomb holding them back. Emma was crying silently. Claire white-faced but trying to be brave. "It's all right." Jed called. "We're all right." They weren't. Not really. The barn was gone. Winter coming, their hay and grain stores destroyed. But they were alive. All of them. Even the horses scattered across the pasture. Sheriff Clayton arrived within the hour, bringing men from town. There was nothing to do but watch it burn and make sure it didn't spread. As dawn broke gray and bitter, revealing the smoking ruins, Clayton pulled something from the ashes, a charred tin that had once held lamp oil, placed where it would do the most damage. "This was no accident," he said grimly. Jed's face was stone. They all knew who was behind it, but knowing and proving were different things. Whitlock had left town that very night, business supposedly calling him to Laramie. By full daylight, something unexpected happened. Wagons began arriving from town. First the Chens with blankets and food, then Doc Hartley with salve for burns. The Carters brought timber salvaged from their own building project. Even some who'd been at the town meeting came, faced with the reality that whatever they thought of Eliza, no one deserved to lose their livelihood to fire. "We'll need to rebuild before the snow," Mr. Holcomb said, surveying the damage. "I can spare my boys for a few days." "Can't pay you all," Jed said stiffly. Pride was hard to swallow. "Didn't ask you to." Holcomb replied, "Way I see it, this is partly the town's doing. We let Whitlock stir up trouble instead of running him off. Least we can do is help fix what he broke." They worked through the day, clearing debris, salvaging what could be saved. Eliza worked alongside them despite her bandaged hand, carrying water, making food for the workers. Emma shadowed her constantly, needing the reassurance of her presence. Claire helped where she could, her usual chatter subdued. That evening, exhausted and filthy, they gathered in the kitchen. Eliza had managed to make a simple meal from what neighbors had brought. As they ate in tired silence, Emma suddenly spoke. "Mama's hand hurts." It was the clearest sentence she'd spoken since finding her voice again. Jed looked up sharply. "Let me see," he said to Eliza. "It's fine. Let me see." She unwrapped the bandage reluctantly. The burns were worse than she'd admitted, blisters covering her palm and fingers. Jed's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you say something?" "There was work to do." He left the table, returning with the medical supplies Doc Hartley had left. His hands were gentle as he cleaned and rebandaged the burns, but she could feel the tension in him. "You could have been killed," he said quietly. "So could you." "Shadow was Anna's horse," he said. "The last thing. She loved that horse, rode him the day she died. I couldn't let him burn." "I know," Eliza said softly. "That's why I went for him." He looked up at her then, something raw in his eyes. You risked your life for a horse that belonged to my dead wife." "I risked my life for something that mattered to you," she corrected. "To all of you." Claire, who'd been listening with sharp attention, suddenly burst out, "Why would someone burn our barn? We never hurt anyone." Jed and Eliza exchanged glances. How to explain adult cruelty to a child? "Sometimes people do bad things when they're angry." Eliza said carefully, "When they can't have what they want." "Mr. Whitlock wanted you to leave." Claire said, "It wasn't a question. He burned our barn because you stayed." "We don't know that for certain," Jed said, though they all knew the truth. "I hate him," Claire said fiercely. "I hate all of them who were mean to us." "No," Eliza said firmly. "Hate is like fire. Claire, it destroys everything it touches, including the person carrying it." "But he hurt us." "Yes, and he'll face justice for it, one way or another. But we won't let him make us like him. We'll rebuild. We'll go on. We'll be better than he could ever be." Claire considered this, then nodded slowly. Emma climbed into Eliza's lap, careful of her injured hand. "Does it hurt bad?" she whispered. "Some," Eliza admitted, "but it'll heal." "Like us," Emma said with startling clarity. "We hurt, but we heal." Jed made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. He reached across the table, covering Eliza's good hand with his own. "Yeah, little one," he said roughly. "Like us." They sat there in the lamplight, hands linked across the scarred wooden table, a family forged in fire. Quite literally now. Outside, neighbors were still working, the sound of hammers and saws continuing despite the growing darkness. Tomorrow there would be more work, more challenges, more whispers from those who couldn't understand. But tonight, they had this four people choosing each other despite everything, choosing to build rather than burn, to hope rather than hate, to stay rather than run. "I should help with the evening chores," Jed said finally. But he didn't let go of her hand. "The horses need settling." Eliza agreed, but she didn't pull away. They sat a moment longer, none of them quite ready to break this fragile peace. Then Emma yawned enormously, and the spell broke. There were children to put to bed, animals to tend, a life to continue living despite those who would see it destroyed. As Eliza tucked the girls in that night, Claire asked, "Are you sorry you stayed even with the fire?" Eliza thought of flames and fear and the weight of Shadow's halter in her burned hand, of Jed's gentle touch as he tended her wounds, of these two girls who called her Mama and meant it. "No," she said firmly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good," Claire said. "Because we need you. Papa needs you too, even if he doesn't say it." "How do you know that?" Claire smiled, wise beyond her years. "Because he looks at you the way he used to look at the dawn, like he's seeing light after a long darkness." Eliza kissed both girls goodnight and went to her room, still separate. But somehow that felt right for now. Through her window, she could see lanterns moving in the darkness where men still worked on their new barn. She could see Jed among them, tall and steady despite his exhaustion. Her hand throbbed with each heartbeat, a reminder of what they'd almost lost and what they'd saved. But pain, she'd learned, was just another kind of living. It meant you'd chosen to reach for something despite the risk of burning. And sometimes, she thought as she watched Jed help raise a new beam against the stars, sometimes the reaching was worth any amount of fire. The letter lay hidden in the bottom drawer of Anna's dresser, beneath layers of carefully folded linens that still smelled faintly of lavender. Eliza found it by accident while searching for winter quilts, the first freeze having come early to Wyoming territory. She almost put it back unread. The envelope bore Anna's name in delicate script, and the pages within were clearly private, a wife's last words never sent. But something in the way it had been placed, deliberate and waiting, made her pause. Asterisk, my dearest Jed. It began. Asterisk. If you are reading this, Then I have found the courage to do what I cannot speak aloud. Or perhaps I have lost the last battle with the darkness that has claimed me since Emma's birth. Either way, I am gone, and you are left with questions I should have answered while breath still filled my lungs. Eliza sank onto the bed, her hands trembling. She should stop reading. This wasn't meant for her. But Anna's words pulled her forward. Asterisk. The doctor calls it melancholia. Mother would have called it weakness. But I know its true name. It is drowning while standing on dry land. It is looking at our beautiful daughters and feeling nothing but terror that I will fail them as I have failed you. Asterisk. Emma cries, and I cannot comfort her. Claire asks why Mama is sad, and I have no answer. You look at me with such patience, such love, and I know I am breaking your heart day by day. A good wife would fight harder. A good mother would not have these thoughts that circle like vultures. Asterisk. I write this in my clearer moments, when the fog lifts enough to see. I want you to know, I need you to know this is not your fault. You have been the best of husbands. Patient when I deserved frustration. Gentle when the world felt sharp enough to cut. You tried to love me back to life, but some wounds go too deep for love to heal. Tears blurred Eliza's vision. She thought of Jed's careful distance, his way of watching the girls like he might lose them too. All this time, he'd been carrying not just grief, but guilt. Asterisk. I know what the town whispers, that you are difficult, demanding, that you drove me to this darkness. Let them talk. You and I know the truth that you held me up long past when I could stand alone. That, without you, I would have been lost months ago. Asterisk. But I am tired, my love, so tired. And our girls need a mother who can smile without pretense, who can hold them without shaking, who can show them what it means to be strong. I am not that mother. Perhaps I never was. Asterisk. If I find the courage to leave this world, know it is not escape I seek, but mercy for them, for you, for myself. And if I am too coward even for that, then I pray this illness takes me gently, that I simply fade until only memory remains. Asterisk. Find someone. Jed. After I'm gone, find a woman who can be what I could not. Not someone like me, not delicate or refined or educated. Find someone with earth under her nails and steel in her spine. Someone who has survived her own darkness and emerged scarred but whole. The girls need that. You need that. Asterisk. I loved you with all the heart I had to give. That it was not enough is my failing, not yours. Be happy, my dearest. Show our girls that joy can bloom even in soil watered by tears. Asterisk. All my love. Anna. Asterisk. The letter was dated 3 days before her death. 3 days she'd carried these words, this terrible resolve. And then a walk by the creek. Water not even deep enough to cover her shoulders, but deep enough for a woman who had already stopped fighting. You weren't supposed to find that. Eliza looked up to find Jed in the doorway. She hadn't heard him come upstairs. His face was unreadable, but his hands gripped the door frame like it was the only thing holding him upright. I'm sorry, she began, but he shook his head. I knew it was there. Been meaning to burn it. Just couldn't. He entered the room, their room in name, if not in practice, and sat heavily on the chair by the window. I found it the day after she died, hidden in her sewing basket. Read it so many times I could recite it. Jed. She was right, you know, about finding someone different, someone strong. He looked at Eliza then, his gray eyes full of ghosts. That night in the storm, when I saw you standing there, too proud to beg but too desperate to leave, I thought maybe Anna had sent you. Foolish. I know. Not foolish, Eliza said softly. I failed her. The words came out raw, scraped from some deep place. Saw her struggling and couldn't fix it, couldn't save her. You can't save someone from their own mind, Eliza said. No more than you could save them from consumption or cancer. It was an illness. Jed, not a choice. Felt like a choice. Feels like one still, some days. She rose from the bed, crossing to kneel beside his chair. She loved you. Loved the girls. That shines through every word. But sometimes love isn't enough to hold a person to life. Sometimes the darkness is just too heavy. He looked down at her, something breaking in his expression. I've been so afraid that it would happen again, that you'd start to fade like she did, that I'd wake up one day and you'd have that same hollow look. I'm not Anna, Eliza said firmly. I've known my own darkness, yes, but I've also learned to fight it, to dig my fingers into life and hold on even when it hurts. Like with the fire. Like with the fire. She held up her still healing hand. Sometimes holding on leaves scars, but the alternative is letting go. And I've come too far for that. He reached out, tracing the burn scars with infinite gentleness. I should burn the letter. No, Eliza said. Keep it. Someday the girls might need to read it, to understand. When they're older, when they can grasp that their mother's illness wasn't about them. Claire already blames herself sometimes. Says if she'd been a better daughter, maybe. Then we tell her different, every day, as many times as it takes. We show her that sadness that deep isn't caused by little girls who track mud in the house or forget their chores. We, he repeated softly. Yes, we. She met his eyes steadily. I may not be the wife you chose, Jed, but I'm the one who's here, and I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in his face then. He pulled her up, settling her on his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. She should have protested they'd been so careful about boundaries, but it felt right to be held while Anna's words still echoed in the room. She would have liked you, he said into her hair. Would have appreciated the irony, all her education, her refinement, and in the end what we needed was a woman who'd scrubbed floors and fought for every scrap of dignity life afforded her. We're all just people trying to survive. Eliza said, some of us are just more honest about the struggle. They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the room golden. Downstairs. She could hear the girls playing Claire's voice bossy and loving as she directed Emma in some game. Normal sounds of a normal evening, made precious by how close they'd come to losing it all. I need to tell you something, Jed said finally. That night at the town meeting, when I said I married you for the girls, it was true. It was, but not the whole truth. His arms tightened around her. I also did it for me, because somewhere between you making Emma laugh and standing up to Whitlock and running into a burning barn for Anna's horse, I started to hope again. Started to want things I'd thought were buried with her. Eliza's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. What things? Mornings that don't feel like punishment, conversations that go deeper than weather and crops. Someone to share the weight when it gets too heavy. He paused. Someone to love who might love me back, not despite my broken places, but because of how they fit with hers. She turned in his arms to see his face. Jed. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, he said quickly. We can go on as we have been. Separate rooms, careful distances. I just needed you to know, needed to say it while I have the courage. She thought of Anna's letter, of the weight of unspoken words, of how much harder life became when you carried everything alone. Then she leaned forward and kissed him soft, careful, a question more than a statement. He made a sound like a man drowning who'd found air. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with the same gentleness he'd shown her burns. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. Are you sure? He asked. I'm sure I want to try, she said. To build something real from all these broken pieces, but slowly, carefully. We've both been hurt enough for one lifetime. Slowly, he agreed. Then, with a ghost of a smile, though maybe we could start with you moving your things to this room. Winter's coming, and it seems foolish to heat 2 rooms when one would do. Practical, she teased. Very romantic. Mr. Walker. Mrs. Walker, he countered. And the name no longer felt like a costume she was wearing, but something that might actually fit. That night, after the girls were asleep, She moved her few possessions to the room that had been Anna's. The letter went back in the drawer, not hidden now but kept safe, a reminder that love takes many forms, that grief and joy could exist in the same heart, that sometimes the greatest courage is simply continuing to breathe. As she settled into their bed now, Jed pulled her close, her back to his chest, his arm careful of her healing hand. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For finding the letter, for understanding, for staying when staying is hard." She laced her fingers through his. "We stay," she said simply. "That's what we do. We stay and we build and we hope, day by day." Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside, warmed by more than the stove, two people who had known the worst of life dared to believe in the possibility of better. Not perfect perfection was for fairy tales, but better. And for now, better was more than enough. The territorial judge arrived on a Tuesday morning in late November, his black carriage cutting through fresh snow like an omen. Word had already reached the ranch Charles Whitlock was pushing for a formal inquiry into the Walker family situation, claiming the hasty marriage was a sham designed to circumvent proper child welfare concerns. Eliza was kneading bread when Sheriff Clayton rode up with the news. Through the kitchen window, she watched Jed's shoulders tense as he listened, saw his hands clench and unclench at his sides. When he came inside, his face was carefully blank. "Judge Peterson wants to interview the girls," he said. "Tomorrow, at the courthouse." "Without us present," Eliza's hand stilled in the dough. "He says it's standard, to make sure they feel free to speak truthfully." Claire, who had been practicing her letters at the table, looked up sharply. "Speak truthfully about what?" Jed and Eliza exchanged glances. They'd tried to shield the girls from the worst of the town's gossip, but children had a way of sensing undercurrents. "Some people want to make sure you and Emma are happy and safe here," Eliza said carefully. "The judge wants to talk to you about living with us." "But we are happy," Claire said, her voice rising. "Why would we live anywhere else?" Emma, who'd been quietly playing with her doll, suddenly burst into tears. "No go!" she wailed, reverting to her shorter phrases when upset. "Stay, Mama, stay, Papa." Eliza gathered Emma into her arms while Jed knelt beside Claire. "No one's going anywhere," he said firmly. "We're a family, legal and proper. But sometimes we have to prove that to people who don't understand." That evening, after the girls were in bed, Jed and Eliza sat by the fire planning their approach. The marriage certificate was legal, but Whitlock had deep pockets and connections. If he'd found a sympathetic judge, "We could run," Jed said quietly. "Pack up tonight, head west, California maybe, or Oregon, start fresh where nobody knows us." "Is that what you want?" Eliza asked. He stared into the flames. "I want my girls safe. I want you safe. This ranch, it's just land." "No," Eliza said firmly. "It's their home, where their mother is buried, where they learned to ride, and where Emma spoke her first word after the silence. We don't run from bullies. Remember, this is different. This is the law. The law should protect families, not tear them apart." She moved to sit beside him on the worn settee. "We face this together. Show them what we really are." "And what's that?" She took his hand, still rough from rebuilding the barn. "Imperfect people doing our best. A family built on choice rather than chance. Something worth fighting for." The next morning dawned bright and bitter cold. Eliza dressed the girls in their best clothes, Claire protesting the stiff collar while Emma clutched Mr. Hoppy with white knuckles. The ride to town felt endless, each turn of the wheels carrying them closer to judgment. The courthouse was a modest building trying to look important with columns and a brass plaque. Inside, Judge Peterson waited, a thin man with sharp eyes and a mouth that looked unfamiliar with smiling. Beside him sat a woman with a pinched face and a notebook. "Mrs. Hartwell from the Territorial Child Welfare Committee." The judge introduced She'll be observing. Whitlock was there too, sitting in the corner like a well-dressed spider. He smiled when he saw Eliza, the expression never reaching his eyes. "We'll speak with the children first," Judge Peterson announced. "Alone." Eliza felt Emma's arms tighten around her neck. "It's all right, sweetheart," she whispered. "Claire will be with you." "I'll go first," Claire said, lifting her chin. "Emma can wait with you until I'm done." Brave, fierce Claire, trying to protect her sister even now. She marched into the judge's chambers like a small soldier going to war. The wait was agony. Emma buried her face in Eliza's shoulder, occasionally whimpering. Jed paced, his boots wearing a pattern in the floor. Whitlock read a newspaper with theatrical calm. After 20 minutes, Claire emerged, her face flushed but determined. "Emma's turn," she said, taking her sister's hand. "Don't worry. Just tell the truth like we practiced." Emma looked terrified, but she went, "Mister." Hoppy clutched against her chest. This weight was worse, knowing how Emma struggled with strangers, how easily she retreated into silence when frightened. Finally, both girls were returned to them. The judge called the adults in, leaving the children with Sheriff Clayton in the outer office. "Your daughters are interesting," Judge Peterson began, consulting notes. "The elder is quite fierce in her devotion. Perhaps too fierce. She threatened to bite me if I suggested removing them from your care." Despite everything, Eliza felt a flash of pride. That was her Claire. And the younger one barely spoke, though what she did say was illuminating. He looked up. "She called you Mama, Mrs. Walker, repeatedly, despite knowing you're not her birth mother." "She chose that herself," Eliza said. "I never asked her to." The judge turned to Whitlock. "Mr. Whitlock, you've made serious allegations about Mrs. Walker's past and the legitimacy of this marriage. Do you have proof beyond gossip and innuendo?" Whitlock stood, producing a folder. "Affidavits from citizens concerned about the moral environment these children are exposed to. Mrs. Walker lived in a house of ill repute." "As a laundress and maid," Eliza interrupted, "unless you have evidence otherwise." "The association alone is not a crime," Judge Peterson said coolly. "Many women take whatever honest work they can find. What else?" Whitlock's face darkened. "The marriage was clearly one of convenience, arranged to circumvent proper oversight. All marriages are convenient in some way," the judge observed. "Some for money, some for land, some for companionship. The law doesn't require love. Mr. Whitlock, only consent." He turned to Jed and Eliza. "Do you both consent to this marriage?" "Yes," they said in unison. "And do you share a household function as a family unit?" "We do," Jed said. "Eliza has been a mother to my girls in every way that matters." Mrs. Hartwell spoke for the first time. "The children do seem well cared for. Clean, fed, obviously loved. The younger one's recovery from selective mutism is particularly noteworthy." "There's also the matter of the fire," Sheriff Clayton interjected from the doorway. He'd apparently been listening. "The barn that burned the night after the town meeting. Curious timing." Whitlock's face went red. "You can't possibly suggest—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Clayton said mildly. "Just noting facts, like how you left town that very night, how the fire was definitely arson, how a man might do desperate things when his pride's been wounded." Judge Peterson's sharp eyes moved between them all. "Mr. Whitlock, what exactly is your interest in this family? You're not a relative, not a neighbor. Why this crusade?" Whitlock straightened his expensive coat. "I'm a concerned citizen. You're a man who tried to intimidate a woman into submission and got rebuffed," Clayton said bluntly. "Everyone knows you've been sniffing around Mrs. Walker since she arrived in town. This is spite, pure and simple. How dare you? Enough. Judge Peterson's voice cut through the brewing argument. I've heard sufficient testimony. He stood, gathering his papers. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, I find no cause to question your custody of these children. The marriage is legal, the home is stable, and the children are thriving. Eliza sagged with relief, feeling Jed's hand find hers. However, the judge continued, I am concerned about the environment in this town. The gossip, the barn fire. These hearings children shouldn't grow up under such scrutiny. He looked directly at Whitlock. Mr. Whitlock, I suggest you find business interests elsewhere, far elsewhere. Sheriff Clayton will explain the consequences of continued harassment. Whitlock's face was purple with rage, but he said nothing. Furthermore, Judge Peterson said, I'll be recommending to the Territorial Committee that Eden's Hollow receive additional oversight regarding child welfare decisions. It seems some here are too quick to judge based on prejudice rather than fact. He turned to Jed and Eliza. Take your daughters home. Love them well. And know that the law recognizes what anyone with eyes can see. You're a family, properly made if unconventionally formed. They collected the girls, Claire chattering about how she'd told the judge about Eliza teaching her to make pie crust and Jed showing her how to gentle a spooked calf. Emma, still clutching Mr. Hoppy, reached for Eliza with a soft mama up. As they prepared to leave, Judge Peterson pulled Eliza aside. That younger child called you an angel, he said quietly. Said you brought her voice back. Whatever your past, Mrs. Walker, your present speaks well of you. Outside, the November air was sharp and clean. As Jed helped them into the wagon, townspeople gathered to watch. Some faces showed disappointment, others relief. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. Doc Hartley tipped his hat. Can we go home now? Claire asked. I want to finish my letters. Yes, Jed said, his voice rough with emotion. Let's go home. As they drove out of town, Eliza looked back to see Whitlock storming toward the hotel, Clayton following at a measured pace. By tomorrow, he'd be gone. The threat ended, at least for now. You know what this means, Claire said suddenly. What's that, sweetheart? Eliza asked. We're really truly a family now. The judge said so. It's official and everything. Emma nodded solemnly. Family, she repeated, the word clear and certain. Jed reached over, taking Eliza's hand. We were a family before, he said. This just means everyone else has to accept it. As the ranch came into view, their new barn standing proud against the sky, Eliza felt something settle deep in her chest. Home, family. Words that had once seemed foreign now felt as natural as breathing. For the children, she murmured, remembering how this all started. But also for us, Jed replied, echoing her thoughts. Claire leaned forward between them. Can we have pie tonight to celebrate? Pie sounds perfect, Eliza said, pulling both girls close. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, a family returning home after facing down the world together. Behind them, Eden's Hollow grew smaller, its judgments and gossip fading with distance. Ahead lay their ranch, their life, their future imperfect perhaps, but unquestionably theirs. The territory had spoken through Judge Peterson. They belonged together. But more importantly, they had spoken for themselves, in burned hands that saved horses and small voices saying mama and marriage vows that meant more with each passing day. This was what love looked like, not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but choosing each other again and again, especially when the choosing was hard. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Asterisk, asterisk. 50 years later, asterisk, asterisk. Sarah Walker Mills sat in her grandmother's parlor, the same room where so many evenings had been spent listening to stories by lamplight. The old house had electricity now, and indoor plumbing, but the heart of it remained unchanged warm, welcoming, filled with the echoes of lives well lived. "Tell me again about how you and Grandpa really met," Sarah asked, settling into the worn settee that had been reupholstered 3 times but never replaced. Eliza Walker, now 74, her once dark hair silver as moonlight, smiled at her granddaughter. "Which version do you want, the one we told the town, or the truth?" "The truth. Always the truth." Through the window, Eliza could see the family cemetery on the hill. Jed rested there now, gone these past 2 winters. But his presence lingered in every board of the house, every fence post, every carefully tended garden bed. Beside him lay a stone marked, "Anna Walker, beloved mother," tended as faithfully as if she'd been friend rather than predecessor. "It was a storm," Eliza began, her voice still strong despite the years. "October, 1879. I had nowhere to go and too much pride to beg." She told the story complete, the desperation, the gossip, the fire, the fight to keep their family together. Sarah listened with rapt attention, occasionally glancing at the photographs lining the mantel. There was Claire, now a judge herself in Denver, fierce defender of women's rights, and Emma, who'd found her voice and never stopped using it, teaching at the Territorial College, married to a gentle professor who appreciated her quiet strength. "Grandpa saved you," Sarah said when the tale was done. "We saved each other," Eliza corrected. "That's what family does." She reached for the old wooden box on the side table, lifting out yellowed papers, pressed flowers, a small carved bird worn smooth by handling. "After the judge declared us a legal family, your grandfather said something I'll never forget. He said, 'The law's caught up to what we already knew.' Then he took me and the girls to that little valley by the creek. You know the one, where the violets grow wild." Sarah nodded. She'd played there as a child, brought her own children there now. He'd already marked out a garden plot, said every family needed something growing, something alive that they'd planted together. Eliza smiled at the memory. "We spent that whole afternoon planning what we'd grow come spring. Claire wanted strawberries, Emma wanted flowers, I wanted vegetables, practical things. Your grandfather." She paused, touching the carved bird gently. "He wanted an apple tree, said it would take years to bear fruit, but that was the point. We were planting for tomorrow, not just today." "The big apple tree by the barn?" Sarah breathed. "The one we all learned to climb on?" "The very same, though it's had to be pruned hard a few times. Like all of us, I suppose. Cut back to grow stronger." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you miss him, Grandpa?" "Every day," Eliza said simply. "But I'm grateful too. Grateful for 48 years together. For the children we raised, the grandchildren who came after, the life we built from such broken beginnings." She pulled out another paper, Jed's handwriting, shaky with age, his last letter to her, written when he knew his time was short. "He left this for me," she said. "Would you like to read it?" Sarah took the letter with careful hands. Asterisk, my dearest Eliza. Asterisk. When you came to us that night in the storm, I thought I was saving you. What a fool I was. You saved us, me, Claire, our silent Emma. You took a house of grief and made it ring with laughter again. You showed us that love isn't just a feeling but a choice, made new each morning like bread. Asterisk. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for staying when staying was hard. Thank you for seeing past my walls to the man I could become with you beside me. Asterisk. I go to my rest knowing our girls are strong, our grandchildren are loved, and the woman who brought my family back to life will carry our story forward. Asterisk. Until we meet again. Your devoted Jed Asterisk. T. The apple tree needs pruning come spring. Mind you don't let Claire do it, she's still too fierce with the shears. Sarah wiped her eyes, laughing at the last line. He knew you all so well. We knew each other, Eliza said. That's what 50 years does, wears away the pretense until only truth remains. A car horn honked outside, modern times intruding. Sarah's husband, come to collect her and the children. As Sarah prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Grandma, that first night, when Grandpa brought you home, were you scared?" Eliza considered the question. "Terrified," she admitted, "but more scared of not trying than of trying and failing. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help. Sometimes the strongest thing is admitting you need a place to belong." After Sarah left, Eliza sat in the gathering dusk, surrounded by memories. The house was quiet now, but not empty. It hummed with the accumulation of years' children's laughter, Christmas mornings, arguments and apologies, first steps and last words. She picked up her journal, the latest in a long line stretching back to those early days when writing helped her make sense of a life transformed. Her handwriting wasn't as steady as it used to be, but the words still came. Asterisk. They ask me sometimes, the young ones, how we did it, how two broken people built something whole, how we faced down a town's judgment and won, how we turned necessity into love. Asterisk. I tell them the truth slowly, carefully, one day at a time. We weren't special. We were just stubborn. Too stubborn to let gossip win. Too stubborn to let the past define us. Too stubborn to quit when quitting would have been easier. Asterisk. Jed gave me shelter that night in the storm. But we built the home together board by board, word by word, year by year. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and strong and ours. Asterisk. The apple tree is heavy with fruit this year. I'll make pies tomorrow, using Anna's recipe that Claire taught me, that I taught Emma, that Emma taught her daughters. The chain continues. Love passed down like receipts for pie crust and remedies for broken hearts. Asterisk. Tomorrow, the Methodist Church is dedicating a plaque, the Walker Family Fund for Women in Need. Jed would laugh at the irony. The town that once wanted to cast me out now holds me up as an example. Time softens all things, even judgment. Asterisk. But tonight, I'm just an old woman missing her husband, grateful for her girls, proud of the life we carved from nothing but need and nerve and the radical notion that broken people deserve love too. Asterisk. The storm brought me to this place. Love kept me here. And here, in this house that heard Emma's first word after silence, that saw Claire defend us with tiny fists, that sheltered a family stitched from loss and hope here, I'll stay until my own storm comes to carry me to where Jed waits. Asterisk. The violets will bloom again come spring. They always do. She set down her pen and moved to the window, looking out at the ranch that had been sanctuary and battlefield, witness to a love story nobody would have scripted but everyone, in the end, had to respect. In the distance, she could see the lights of Eden's Hollow, now grown into a proper town. Somewhere out there were other women facing storms, literal or metaphorical. Other families being formed in unconventional ways. Other love stories beginning with necessity and blooming into something deeper. "For the children," she murmured, touching the glass. "But also for us." The words that had become their refrain, their promise, their truth. As she prepared for bed in the room she'd shared with Jed for almost half a century, Eliza placed the carved bird on her nightstand where she could see it first thing come morning. A reminder that even when the storm seems endless, even when you have nowhere to go, sometimes salvation comes in the form of a stranger on horseback, offering not just shelter but the chance to build something worth keeping. She'd been Eliza May Thornton, cast out and desperate. She'd become Eliza Walker, wife and mother and defender of the broken. Now she was simply herself, keeper of stories, tender of memories. Living proof that love doesn't always arrive in expected packages. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows like it had that night so long ago. But inside, she was warm. She was home. She was held by the accumulation of years and tears and laughter. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts about Eliza and Jed's journey. If this story touched your heart, Please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 like this video, and hit the hype button to help more people discover these tales of love, courage, and redemption in the American frontier.